Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the latest Success Story Studio webinar, Keeping the Human in Marketing, a conversation with Will McLean. And I'm your host, Ted Goldwyn of Success Story Studio. I want to go over the agenda real quick with everyone. We're going to go about 45 minutes today. We'll start with a quick minute about Success Story Studio and what we do. I'll talk a little bit about some of the latest trends that we're seeing in content marketing and specifically B2B or business to business content marketing. Then I'll introduce our guest, Will McLean, and have a conversation with him about his journey as a content marketing manager for companies both large and small. We'll discuss what types of content are working well today and specifically about keeping the human and empathy in marketing and how we can do that, particularly in the age of AI. If we have a few minutes at the end, we'll open it up for Q&A and wrap things up. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. So I want to talk a little bit about Success Story Studio. We are a boutique marketing agency devoted to one thing and one thing only, producing concise, impactful case studies as a turnkey productized service. Our mission is to help small businesses and professional services firms like financial advisors, CPAs, attorneys, and others turn their client success stories into powerful new business attraction tools. Think of it as turbocharged testimonial marketing. So I want to kick off today's session with some of the latest research that's been done on content marketing and the impact that it's having, challenges and pain points that marketers are dealing with today. And these statistics I'm sharing on your screen are from the latest B2B content marketing benchmark study from Content Marketing Institute, or CMI. And I do encourage you to check out their website. They have a wealth of information out there. We have no affiliation with them directly, but they've always been a great resource of research specifically around content marketing. So I thought some of these stats from their latest study were interesting and informative, particularly pertaining to the conversation that Will and I will have today. So AI, I know, is on everyone's mind, and specifically generative AI tools like ChatGPT and others. This research was taken from this past fall, and at that point, 3 out of 4, 72% of business-to-business marketers had already begun using generative AI tools in their content marketing. Over half of them use AI as a brainstorming tool, while 45% use it to research headlines and keywords. And interestingly, 45% also use it to write actual content drafts. In terms of challenges that marketers are facing today, in their content marketing strategy, the number one that came through loud and clear, 57% cite creating the right content for their audience. And that's an age-old challenge that I'm sure Will and I will get into in our discussion. 54% also cite creating a consistent stream of content to reach their audience. 45% say search engine optimization is a top pain point. And then 44% struggle with creating quality content over time. So it definitely seems to be a time and resource issue, pain point for a lot of marketers out there. And then one other topic I was hoping to get into with Will today, if we have time, is around how marketing integrates and coordinates with other key functions within the organization. Interestingly, 70% of content marketers integrate their content strategy with marketing, communications, and sales in their organization, which I thought was a pretty high number, and it's really good to see. So with that, I'd like to introduce our guest for today's webinar. I'm really excited to introduce all of you to Will McLean, who's Senior Content Marketing Manager at DocuSign, a very well-known brand in the industry, and leader in document management solutions. Will has worked in various marketing roles over the last 2 decades, which all I'll say about that is it makes him younger than me. No matter the content type or topic, Will focuses on storytelling that emphasizes the human element. And he spends his free time playing bass in various bands, coaching his son's soccer team, and traveling. So welcome, Will.
Thank you so much, Ted. I really appreciate it. Just happy to be able to do this and love Success Story Studio and what you guys are all about. So I'm just happy to be here.
Great, great. Well, thanks for agreeing to have this conversation with us today. And I thought I'd start, Will, by having you share a little bit more than that thumbnail sketch I just provided about your journey, your career journey as a marketer. Where did you start and where are you now?
Yeah, sure. So I think where I first started was pretty much in college when I was editor of the newspaper. I mean, that is content, and part of the job was trying to market it, in a way to the students so that they would read it. But sure, not traditional content marketing, but I've always been interested in writing and editing. And so that was the first time I really started doing something official with it, if you will, other than just, writing stories in my free time.
Hmm.
And then right out of college, I started working at the college in the advancement department. And basically, what that did was it afforded me the opportunity to get into proposal writing.
Hmm.
So, the department was dedicated to trying to raise money for the school. And a lot of what we had to do was apply for grants. And so I started doing proposal writing and learning all about that. And being in the Washington, D.C. area, there's a ton of government agencies here. And I started contracting with several of them because, the name of the game is getting your projects funded, getting your company funded, all that kind of stuff. And so there was no shortage of people looking for help doing proposal writing. And not to date myself too much, but um, these were definitely the days where you're printing out 300 different 300 copies of the proposal, and depending on who they were going to, you had to have different cover letters, and some would get rejected if you use staples instead of paper clips or red paper clips or whatever. It's all kinds of stuff like that, which I haven't been in that industry in a while, so I'm hoping they've modernized, but maybe not all. The government's usually
Right.
lags behind some, but just anyway, all that to say that was really my start into creating content. And I will say that with proposal writing, especially at the bigger companies that I was contracting for, sometimes upwards of, I don't know, 40 or 50 different people would be writing different sections of the proposal.
Hmm.
And it fell to me to kind of synthesize all of that content and give it one tone of voice. And that has helped me immeasurably through my career because, even today, when marketing materials and content is coming from all different parts of the business, which we might get into later, uh, it's really important to be speaking with the same voice. And so I really look back to that time as setting the foundation for my content marketing career. So then from proposal writing, I started working at a small government contractor. I mean, I was no longer a contractor, but I worked for a contractor then, and doing more proposal writing. But then they started having me do marketing data sheets and things like that, and that was my first kind of foray into that type of material. I think at the time they called them slick sheets, which is a term I haven't heard in a long time, but so that's kind of how I dipped my toe in there. And then from there, I went to work for Sienna, which is an optical networking company, and I spent 15 years there. And I started there kind of at the bottom rung as just an editor. And I don't know, maybe we can get into this more later, but I went from editing and then to writing and then to content strategy, and then someplace where I didn't see myself going was into content operations, which I was basically responsible for bringing in a SaaS tool that managed the entire content process for the company.
Hmm.
And I think we might get into this later, but when I first started, maybe content marketing teams existed and I just wasn't aware of them. But certainly when I started at Sienna, there was no dedicated content marketing team.
Mm.
And you mentioned Content Marketing Institute earlier, and I've been to I love them, and I've been to a few of their trade shows and things. And from what I understand, content marketing as a as a whole separate department hasn't been a thing for that long, right? And I think in these 20 years, it's really started to blow up, if you will. And so my career progression kind of followed that. And so then I found myself kind of leading a content marketing team at Sienna. And so, we can get into the details of that. But basically, the operations side of it was something I hadn't really considered. I always wanted to only write and edit, but and this may foreshadow some of our further discussion too, is that I'm glad that I got into the strategy side and the operations side, because the more AI is writing content,
Mhm.
the less content I have to write, but it all still needs to be managed. We all still have to do strategy, and we all still have to talk to customers and find out what they want, all that kind of thing, all those kinds of things. I don't think, AI is replaced yet, but it's good. I'll just give, a bit of advice is to try and, diversify in the content marketing space. So I
Mm.
only wanted to edit it first, and then I started writing more. I thought, man, I only want to write. But the more I branched out and the more I learned, I think it just has served me well over time. Sorry, long-winded answer there. Hopefully that is
No,
helpful.
that's great, Will. Thank you. And you gave us a lot of jumping off points there. Yeah, I'm very interested to talk with you about, how that, how content marketing has changed and evolved as a discipline, even in, the 20 years or so that you've been doing that piece of it. I mean, I'll even say from my perspective, I've been a freelance content writer for about 10 years now. Prior to that, I was doing other things in financial services. And even when I started back in, 2014, it seemed like it was just starting to coalesce. It was actually a really good time to kind of get into that space as a writer. And content was becoming, as a term, becoming very, very hot. And I think companies, in the B2B space were really starting to recognize how important that was in terms of conveying their message to the market, in terms of producing thought leadership that resonates
Mhm.
with the audience, and really using it as a tool to kind of expand their platform and reach. So you mentioned that, kind of early on, you were starting as sort of an editor, and, what was content, in those early stages, I guess we're looking back like early mid 2000s, right? Was content even, a thing? Was it even a term that people were banding about? And kind of what did it mean in those early, the early roles that you had there at Sienna?
Yeah, when I first started, I think the job announcement that I applied to was just writer and editor. It didn't even say the word content, right? To your point. And I think if someone had said to me, you're in charge of content, I would have. I'm not sure I would have known what that meant, and because I would think of it on the macro level that everything a company puts out there in the world is content in a way. And I think as over time, as companies started to realize how important it is to not only control the message, but to to produce content that speaks directly to what their audiences want and need, how powerful that was, right? And I think that kind of got the ball rolling. And I just as a personal anecdote, uh, I remember, asking for more budget to do things like, hey, do we even know how much content we have out there that we're putting out on the website? Do we know how it's performing? All of these things, like metrics and all of this stuff was new to me at the time, and I had to make a business case basically, and to show how I would use this budget. And I think when we saw the return on investment of not only creating content that speaks to your audience, right, the right content, but then seeing how important it is to promote that content. Just another aside is that we can write the best paper in the world, but if nobody reads it, then it's not going to have any impact, right? So throughout my career, I've seen that it's really, really important to promote it. And so when we started to see the return on investment from our promoted content, then the leadership started to take more notice and think, oh, we can actually move the needle here just by really honing in on what we're producing, how we're producing it, where we're promoting it, all that type of stuff. And I think that just started to really get the ball rolling and think, you know what, maybe we need a leader and a team to really sit down and do all this. Again, I could be ignorant about this, but I think some of that stuff was probably happening disparately across an organization.
Mhm.
But I think companies that have benefited the most from this are ones that recognized early on, hey, if we put some structure around this and bring these people kind of all under one umbrella, we'll get the most benefit from it.
Yeah, excellent. And having a strategy around it, right, with what you
Yeah,
want to do rather than doing it haphazardly or ad hoc, right?
yeah, exactly.
So looking back to those early days, what were some of the content methods, formats, approaches that you took, and was it kind of let's try anything, throw it against the wall, or was there a strategy around the type of content you were producing?
Yeah, so I think obviously, if we're talking still mid to early 2000s, obviously we were, starting to do less with paper
Hmm.
and more do things more digitally. I mean, I still remember the file cabinets just jammed with content that we had created. It was always important to have physical documents to take to trade shows or to take to sales meetings as leave behinds and all that. And I'm not saying that there's still not a place for some of that, but over time, I just saw less and less paper and more digital content, which then, of course, opened up, more avenues like to be able to measure impact and success and stuff. And I remember early on working on email campaigns, and um, I feel like I don't have the data to back this up, but I feel like early on, email campaigns were more effective just because people weren't getting as much content in their inbox as they are today. Um, and we saw early on, we saw a lot of great returns, a lot of click through rate, things like that. And I think over time, as people's inboxes just filled up, the things just get lost. And now, just for continuing with the email example, we have to be much more targeted in what we're saying in the email. Breaking up your marketing database into small segments. This small group of customers prefers this type of product, or they have this challenge to solve. And I'll say also that early on with those email campaigns, we were just writing generally a lot of times about ourselves, the company or the product.
Mm.
And as we got more sophisticated, it became, and I really think this is crucial, it became much more about what what challenge can we help you solve as the customer, right, or as the prospect. Um, and I think this might tie into some other things we talk about, but really the way to know those things is to have, you know, face to face or human conversations with people to understand
Mm.
exactly what their challenges are. And when customers or prospects know that you understand exactly the challenge they're having and that you're wanting to solve it rather than just blasting out the specs and features of your latest product, I think it has a resonates a lot better. So, long-winded answer, but I think over time things just got so much more sophisticated. But there's always a downside, so you just have to be careful with if if everything is digital, it starts to lose some of the personality. So you kind of have to balance the two.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, we'll definitely get into the human element in a few minutes, but really interesting the way you talk about email. And I'm wondering, has so content's a very important piece of that sales funnel when you look at
Yeah.
the marketing and sales connection. And for a long time it's been that, you use content to really, get the contact info of your lead or prospect, which is, email is kind of that gold standard. You mentioned that, or I'm hearing you say that email is less effective now as a marketing channel than it was maybe a couple of decades ago. Is getting that email address still kind of the gold standard in terms of that sales funnel and moving your lead to becoming a true prospect and then closing the sale eventually? Does that still work?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I just, have to say I'm not I do work with some email marketing stuff still at my current role, but I certainly don't want to say it's not worthwhile. It's not worth doing. You're right. You have to get the contact information some way. And I think it pays to be really smart and really targeted with
Mhm.
the emails, right? But yeah, of course, any way you can get that information to then being able to offer up more personalized content to people. Yeah, but you're right. You have to start somewhere. Yeah, and this kind of leads into something I'm more familiar with lately, which is whether to gate or ungate your content.
Yeah.
Because just a few years ago, it was we have to gate everything. People
Mm.
people aren't responding to the emails and giving their information as much. So we have to make sure any interaction, for example, on the website, whether it's to get a piece of content, watch a webinar, all that type of stuff, we have to get that information. So we have to gate stuff now. And again, not speaking too specifically about what we do at DocuSign, but the pendulum I think has started to go, swing the other way, where um, we've gotten more eyeballs and more interest by offering a lot of stuff ungated. At least, you know, it gets deeper into that kind of customer journey where we're still offering ungated stuff now,
Mm.
where it used to be maybe just the first interaction or two, and then you start gating. Now we're waiting till much later to finally gate something. Of course, that's going to depend on your business and your audience and all that type. You have to measure to find out what's working, and so that means trying all the stuff at first, right, to figure out what's working best. But
Yeah.
um, lately, I'd say we're seeing better results by giving things away and creating interest, and then something like a webinar or something like that. Then of course you want to get the registration info and go from there.
Gotcha. And is the reason why, that you're doing more on the content now is because you're trying to keep that prospect within the website ecosystem and, and viewing more pages on your website and downloading more content, where the fear is if you put up that gate too early, you're going to lose them forever.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think uh I don't know if this is all of the reason why, but attention spans are much shorter now, right?
Mhm.
And look, I'll plant my flag and say we still have to write those long form papers, white papers and the ebooks. I still think that those serve an important purpose because from that derivative and smaller pieces of content can be created, et cetera. But you kind of have to build that big rock, if you will, first. But I'm sure that with the shortened attention spans, we want to, especially on the website, have more smaller chunks of content, if you will, at first at least, to keep people engaged. And then of course if they're more interested, then yeah, then the ebook is a natural step there. And I will say too, um, a lot of change I'm seeing lately is moving away from PDFs. So first we moved away from paper, right? And now
Yep.
I've seen a trend where we're moving away from PDFs and more into kind of interactive content. So something, it can still be the same content that mostly the same content built the same way that it would go into a PDF, but instead it's laid out kind of in smaller chunks of content on a website that someone can click through.
Mhm.
And so they're taking in, they're interacting more that way, and you can see how far they deep or how far they go into that process. Whereas, once you create a PDF, your content's kind of just locked into that format. So
Mhm.
that's another thing I've seen changing. And yeah, sorry if that was on a tangent there, but
No,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
that's interesting, and that does lead me into, specifically what types of content formats. So you mentioned longer form like ebooks and white
yeah,
papers, and they're still effective to a certain extent, but maybe more in an interactive format. So are blogs, shorter articles, what's kind of the sweet spot that you're seeing right now, and then what types of content are resonating the most? Is it more visual content like infographics, video, or just shorter bite-sized chunks? Tell me a little bit about what's working now and how that's changed over time.
yeah. Honestly, I think the blog can still be super effective. Again, I don't want to be too specific, but our blog does very well. We get a lot of interaction from that, and it's not just because we're putting stats and features about our products on the blog. There's a place for that, and that does happen. But a lot of it is, like you mentioned earlier, thought leadership, and how, and this ties into exactly, I think, what with case studies and success
Mhm.
stories, right? A lot of it is about, oh, how did customer X or person X interact with your product and use it to solve a challenge, right? I think that seems to be the best performing content. And just speaking for myself personally, when I'm in a customer journey and I'm looking to purchase something, the what moves the needle most for me is when I see, oh, this is how this person uses it. Or, and again, talking about different formats, it's always great to see a video of how something works. Right now, I understand video can be a high bar. Really slick video creation can be very expensive. But with the advent of iPhones and things like that, that bar is coming down, and anything that shows someone interacting with your product or shows how it solved their problem,
Mhm.
whether it's on the blog or whether it's on TikTok,
Yeah,
it's been moving the needle.
yeah, yeah, that's great. Um, so I want to move on now and talk about, the title of this webinar today was around keeping the human in marketing. And I know when you and I have had conversations, you talk about that a lot. So can you share with me, why that's important? What that role of, keeping the human, the person in marketing is, and specifically, why having an element of empathy is so critical to being effective in your content marketing strategy and approach.
Yeah, it's a very important topic for me. I really think that anytime you can put yourself into someone else's shoes and understand what they're going through, and then they know that you're doing that, and then you can have a conversation, um, that just changes the game, right? It's why we all love great stories, right? You see yourself in these characters, you see challenges being solved, and all of these types of things, and that has a place in content marketing, right? Going back to my proposal writing days, it wasn't just about making sure that the tone of voice all matched. It's really the art of persuasion. And the point of content marketing is to be persuasive, right? Now you know that doesn't mean being disingenuous. It means really putting yourself in someone else's shoes so you can understand their problems and help solve them. And then that's what's persuasive. And I'll say, going back to some of the stats you posted at the beginning, I've definitely used AI to brainstorm, to come up with ideas and titles, and I use a plugin even that help kind of checks my writing. Even the old spell check was a kind of a form of that, right? And I've always said, having someone else look at your work is really important, because a fresh set of eyes is great. So not only do I have humans, reviewing my work, but I use AI to kind of review what I've written as well, especially when we're trying to, you do the small chunks of content. The economy of language is very important, right? And
Mhm.
AI does help with that. Um, and I certainly, wouldn't ever say, hey, you shouldn't use it, because I think you should take advantage of whatever tools you have, to augment what you're doing. But what you can't lose sight of is the humanity. And at the end of the day, I think, yes, AI and technology, all of this stuff, it it a lot of times removes barriers, all these kind of barriers to work. If you can automate manual processes, redundant things, that's a huge thing for DocuSign too. If you can remove all of these barriers, what does it do? But it frees up time for more human interaction. So in my opinion, that's the best way to use it. You use it to then you use technology to then further your human interactions. So I know
Mm.
sometimes it can seem counterintuitive when you say you have to digitize all of your processes internally, and that'll help you to be more human centric. But I firmly believe that it does. And so, but again, just coming back to empathy, to be able to put yourself in someone's shoes, you have to understand where they're coming from. And how do you do that if you're only communicating with them, through AI or through technology? I think at some point you have to have a meaningful interaction with them. I'm not saying that has to be go knocking on doors or making phone calls, but just as a slight tangent, I think that's why the omni-channel experience is so important. That's
Mm.
something we've been trying to get better at. So meeting a customer wherever they are, whether they prefer in person, whether they prefer a chatbot. Maybe some don't want to interact with someone. They just want to learn and make the purchase. But being able to cover all of those bases is important. And of course, using technology to your advantage to understand where to meet them. So hope that helps.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the AI question it's a huge topic of conversation in our industry and in many industries these days, and I agree with you. I mean, I use it as a tool. I mean, AI has been there, like you said, for years in terms of
Yeah.
spell check and Grammarly and some of these other
Yep.
tools.
Yep.
Even for, automated transcriptions, which have become so incredibly accurate there and cost effective,
Yep.
compared to human transcription. So, and in terms of a generative AI tool, I've used it for research and brainstorming, coming up with new ideas, and as a conversational tool too. I mean, it's called conversational AI because you can have a dialogue with it, which
Right.
is fascinating. I think the danger and what we, as creative people, what we need to be careful with is relying on it for the creativity, for
Mhm.
the actual writing, which I think that's a slippery slope. And I think a lot of organizations and people have started using that. And that's where you start seeing a lot of repetition in terms of the content that's getting produced out there. Everything starts to sound the same, because
Yeah.
it's all feeding on itself, really. I mean, that's how the AI learns, is, it learns from, the content it's producing and real people are producing, and it just kind of, so it's kind of a race to the bottom in that sense. So we do need to be careful with it. But I agree with you. If it's unleashing and unlocking our creativity and our ability
Mhm.
to do more, I'm 100% in favor of it.
Yeah, I do want to respond to a question you had earlier about the different types of content. Apologies, but I did not mention specifically customer case studies, customer testimonials, which is
Mhm.
something important to you, obviously. I will say, like, that's kind of the gold standard for us. that moves the needle. So, and I did mention about putting that kind of information on the blog, which works really well. But sometimes it can be hard to get a customer to say, okay, I'm going to put my name out there and say, yes, I use your product, and you can quote me, and you can, a lot of, especially in the enterprise space, a lot of bigger customers don't want to be mentioned, right, publicly, because they maybe have a diverse vendor set, and if you mention, oh, I'm working with you guys, then the other company that they also use might get upset. So there's all types of barriers to that, but that really still, I think, is the gold standard. When you can hear firsthand how someone's using your product and how it solved a problem, that's fantastic. So I guess we need to figure out how to use AI to make that happen as well. So then maybe that'll work better.
Absolutely. Hey, Will, so
Yeah,
I have a few other areas I want to tackle with you, but we
sure.
did get a question from the audience that
Okay.
I thought it'd be good to ask right now and make sure we don't run out of time. So this is from Cindy. I love that you've both referred to AI as a tool in quotes. As someone who loves to be creative and loves to write, I've struggled with whether or not to use it. Yeah, so I think that's really what we were just um, more of a comment than a question, but that's something that, I think we both kind of talked to is, finding that line of where it can serve as a powerful tool and a helpful co-creator in content, and where it crosses over that line to, well, as many people fear, taking our jobs,
Yes.
so as creative humans, as writers, as editors, as producers of content, so where is that line between hopefulness and fear for you when it comes to AI, Will?
Yeah, that's a deep question, Ted. You're right. I mean, first of all, I would say to Cindy, experiment with some of the, many of them are free, at least, it gets, of course, more advanced and you have to pay, the more you want to do with it. But um, yeah, I would suggest experimenting with it, because trust me, I wanted to hate it, you know, as a writer.
Yep.
I thought there's just no way I'm not going to do this. I'm taking a stand. But then I started playing around with it a little bit, and it a lot of times, when I'm sitting down to write something, it's like getting started on that first sentence sometimes can be tough. And I've kind of wavered in my career where sometimes I'll think I need a strong outline. And sometimes I think I just want to sit down and just start writing, and then I'll kind of get around to the outline by writing. So, but that's where I found a good benefit. I can just say, hey, I have to write a paper on X, help me come up with an outline. And I maybe only used 30% of what it suggested, but it kind of got the juices flowing. So even though I wanted to hate it, I will say it can be beneficial. But you're exactly right too. Where I think if someone or a company says, okay, we're getting rid of all of our writers, all of our editors, and we're just going to use this tool, I think you're right. That could be a slippery slope, because what are you losing in that? You're losing humanity, right? That
Yeah.
it's becoming a sanitized version of yourself. Now, um, I fight for all the ways to still stay involved and say, okay, well, even though AI might draft the copy, you still need a human kind of to read it and make sure, does this sound like does it sound like our company? Is it saying the right things?
Yeah.
You still need some sort of management there, right? You still need someone to manage all of the pieces that are created, like all of that stuff still needs to be done by humans, at least for now. So again, I'll go back to saying, diversify as much as possible in your content marketing roles, but learn to harness the tool and for what it is. Um, Helps me sleep at night to be able to be a partner with AI. I'll put it that way. Um, and we'll see what the future holds, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So, I have a question for you. I was hoping you were going to kind of answer a little bit of a mystery for me as, as a writer and creative who's kind of working outside of the corporate ecosystem. Can you talk to a little bit of, the various roles, in in your organization or a little
Mhm.
bit more general in terms of marketing, communication, sales, and how those different functions collaborate, interact with each other, and support each other. And maybe even how that's been evolving over the last few years.
Yeah, so I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say that historically, at least in my experience, there's been difficulty breaking down the silos between all those teams that you mentioned. And I'll also say I think it's absolutely crucial that you do because um, just anecdotally at a previous company, um, I'd been cranking out marketing content, kind of breathing our own fumes, if you will, and I never interacted with the sales team. And then we had like a year-end kickoff, and I met several salespeople, and I said, "Oh, what do you do?" So, "Oh, I write the marketing content." And some of the questions and statements I got were very eye-opening. Like, you know, first of all, I can never find it. That was one big thing. But then the other was, it never talks to my customers' problems. There's no content being created that speaks to prospect X's challenges. And so it was very eye-opening for me to know that the lines of communication between those different teams have to stay open.
Mhm.
You have to know what one hand's doing, the other hand does. Not always easy, especially as in these bigger companies. But it's so important to keep those teams communicating with each other because honestly, the sales team has the most direct impact with people, right? And if you're, tying it together, if you're gonna tell a great story, if you're gonna keep the humanity in your content, and if you're going to sound like you really understand where they're coming from, then you have to understand where they're coming from, right? And the
Mhm.
best way I found to do that, if you don't have a direct tie and to talk to customers, you have to talk to the sales team.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, maybe it's cliche to say break down silos, but it's just to speaking of the human nature, I think it's human nature to just focus on what we're focusing on and what we can control. And that's how silos kind of get erected in the first place. But it's so important to break those and keep communication open.
Will, any practical advice around that, how to break that silos and engage with your counterparts in the sales function? I imagine it's a two-way street, but is
Yeah.
there anything that if there's marketers listening and watching us today, that's struggling with this, because I think it's a kind of universal challenge, you know, how do you kind of begin that conversation and reaching out to those counterparts and other functions?
Yeah. After that experience that I relayed, I started just saying, "Oh, okay, I have a paper to write um, to the healthcare audience. Who's in charge of our healthcare sales?" And I'd look it up, and I would just call the person or Slack them, or I just start a dialogue with them. And 9 times out of 10, when a salesperson hears that you want to create content that speaks directly to their need, their customer's need, it's beneficial. And then you create the content and they use it and it works, whether you're creating slides for them, leave behinds, all that kind of stuff. Um, you just kind of have to break out of your comfort zone and just start talking to people. That's the only way I've been able to do it. So, again, talking about technology and stuff, it's very easy to stay, isolated and insulated, but you just absolutely can't do that. You have to just reach out to people and start talking.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thanks, Will. I know we're coming up on time here. Unfortunately, we didn't even get into a few hobbies that we have in common, specifically that we both happen to play bass
Yeah.
in various types of bands. I know you're a very busy bass player. You play with a children's band, right? As well as more adult improvisational jazz type of projects, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, basically across the gamut. I'll play anything. I mean, as you well know, being a bass player, it's a very supportive role most of the time, and people always seem to need a bass player. And so, I've stayed as busy. as I've wanted to be. I'll put it that way. You know, as you know, playing musicals, even for high schools, like
Mhm.
anything I can, because it's just so joyous to be able to again interact with people in that way.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because I do think, being a bass player, it kind of fits into our professional roles as well as writers, editors, and just as you were talking about the importance of collaboration with people on the sales side and others, product and other people in the organization, being a bass player, you really need to interact and be supportive of everyone else in that group on that musical journey. So I think there are some synergies there or parallels.
Oh,
Um,
we could talk for another 2 hours on that. I absolutely believe that. But if you would have titled the webinar something about bass playing and how it helps in the workplace, I don't know if you would have had any interest.
yeah, well, from other bass players, the
Yeah, right.
people out there. Great. Okay, so as we just going to share my screen here once again. So as we wrap up, I'd like to thank Will McLean for joining us for our Success Story Studio webinar. Really enjoyed this conversation, Will. Really appreciate the generosity of your giving the time to us today. If you have any questions about anything we talked about, if you want to reach out to us at Success Story Studio, here's our contact information. You can learn more about us at successstorystudio.com, or you can reach out to me directly via LinkedIn or at ted@successstorystudio.com. And if you have any questions for Will, I'd be happy to share them with him. Will and I will stay in contact, of course, after this call. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Will, for a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. So much fun to learn about your journey, and we really appreciate the advice and best practices that you shared with us. So thank you, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon.
Thank you so much.